So my first step is I'm going to pick what the largest possible shape is that I can see in it. And I just look at it and I see this large circular shape going from his hips to the very top of the area between his ears and all the way down to his belly and so on. So here we go. So I'm holding my pencil from the back and let's do it. So I'm going to start moving my whole arm, okay? I'm not using my wrist, I'm not using my fingers, I'm holding it here and I'm moving my whole arm. So here we go. I'm just going to, just like that analogy of a guy who's breaking bricks in martial arts, they do that punch, that test punch, you know, they don't actually, you know, lay into it, but they just, they basically just, you know, practice their stroke and then they drop it. So I'm going to practice a circle and then drop it. Okay? Doesn't have to be perfect, it's pre-drawing. This is all going to go away. That's the objective of it. So the next step, I see a couple other circles here. I see another circle within this circle, and that'd probably be about where his shoulders are going down to his little paws. Now, it's always important that when you draw, you measure your forms against itself. For example, in that circle, how far into it would the bottom of his paws be? And so I'm just going to look at it and draw a circle. Loose and sketchy. Nothing fancy. It's all going to go away. All right. So the next part, I see kind of an egg-shaped oval for his head, but you know he's got poofy cheeks. So you know I'm just going to kind of go for kind of another circle going on here, and it all kind of comes right just beneath the top of his body here. So his nose comes right about down to here, you know, about the little below the midpoint. And I'm just going to make a little mark there just to help me out where I gauge it. You know, I see the top of his little skull, you know, right about here. His cheeks don't go all the way to the outside edges, and they're not really tiny either. You know, they come to probably I'd say here. You know, and I'm measuring my forms against itself. You're always measuring your forms against itself. And don't be afraid of making little guidelines. It's very important. So here we go. I'm just gonna drop another circle in there. Okay, and lastly, you know, bunny rabbits, they've got those oval heads. I'm just going to drop, I'm going to pre-draw in a little egg-shaped oval right here, representing where his head is. And so this is the fluffiness of his cheeks and so on. His ears are going to go a little off the paper. I'm more concerned about how these forms interact with each other. But you know, let's look at his ears and try and see how far up, how many ears could we stack on top of each other. You know, so if I were to measure, you can even measure with your pencil if you're getting a drawing that's about the same size. Mine's going to be different in size, but I see about 2 1/3 ears is the height that we've got here. So mine's going to go off the paper a little bit. I'm just going to make a little mark over here. All right, and draw a little oval just to help me out there. You could do triangles too. As a matter of fact, let's do a triangle for the next one. And once again, I'm using my whole arm. My whole arm. Nothing fancy. All right, so oval, triangle. Okay. I see the tip of that ear lines up with the outside of his cheeks. I'm going to make just a little adjustment over here. And we've got most of it plotted out. You know, he's got his paws right here near his face. I'm going to do a couple little ovals representing that. But I'm just not dropping them down at random. I'm thinking when I'm doing it. I'm looking, finding shapes, and I'm measuring it against itself to make an accurate drawing here. He's got a foot that kind of comes out in the foreground. You know, when you draw that foot, think how many of those feet could you stack on top of each other and side by side. All right, he's even got a little leg poking up. So you can see we go from very general, basic shapes to very specific here. Okay, so we could show that leg by a little triangle coming in here. All right, and lastly, it's kind of probably hard for you to see, but he's got another leg just off behind. I'm going to cut into this circle a bit, because that oval that we drew is, you know, it looks like it's a lot of shadow. And that kind of comes back into the outside there. So that's all we need. All right. So what I'm going to do is do a couple of more pre-drawing lines and then jump right into some detail work here. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit. See you in a sec. Okay, so we've got the basic outline of the form. What I did is I'm just kind of going to go in and what I did is I'm refining my lines a little bit. If you look at his ears, they aren't triangles. Triangles are just there to help guide us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and just start to refine my edges down. I'm going to get more and more specific. I'm going to get more detailed. What you'll see me do is I'm going to switch holds. I'm going to go to my detail hold. That's just to give me more control over my line when I go to draw some of the rounded edges here. So let's speed it up and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so we're back. I've got a little bit darker line going on here. You'll see that I drew over the top of a couple of forms that I made, and I even kind of changed the angles of them. As you can see, this is where the top of the circle was for the oval we started, but in the drawing, you don't see the circle. It's kind of a V shape here. So, just getting pretty basic, pretty generic here. Just roughing the shapes in. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just to give you an example of the process of drawing from start to finish, I'm going to try to finish this drawing at a reasonable level, basically using the techniques that we're all going to learn this year. I'm going to add in values, a light source, and so on. So right now you probably don't know what I'm talking about when I'm making reference to those techniques and such, but just go ahead and watch, and I'm going to just hammer this drawing out. Go ahead and sit back and just kind of watch the whole process that it goes through. Okay, let's just stop it really quick there. What I'm doing right now, and what you just saw me do, is basically what I call blocking in your values. A value, it just means different shades of gray. And if you look at this rabbit, right down by the feet, underneath his paws, we got like the darkest shade of gray. The other darkest would be his eyes. Next we got some dark areas right, in here near the base of the ears, but what I'm paying the closest attention to aren't necessarily the dark areas. It's actually the lighter areas, these little areas that you see I didn't touch. And what those are going to be are what I call the highlights. The highlights, there's very few highlights. That's where the light directly hits, or it's the lightest parts of your piece. So what I'm going to do next is, let me back up a little bit, what I just did is I just blocked in those values, so I better know where I need to shade. So what I'm going to do is called establishing the midtone. Midtone's the true value, or true shade of gray, or true color that a form looks. In this piece there's no texture yet, there's really no fur, no detail work or anything. I'm just dealing with lights and darks, and all of that happens at the end. Once I layer in all my darks, then I hit it with texture, or I texture it as I'm layering in my darks. But you'll see what I'm talking about as we go a little further. So I'm just going to speed it up again, and let's rock and roll. where I'm at in the drawing now, everything is pretty much shaded in. Most of the blocks are shaded in. Textures are laid down rapidly. You know, you could devote more time per square inch if you wanted to. It's my goal was mainly to fly through this, but what I'm going to do really quick is use this ebony black. It's just it's a really, really dark pencil. It's designed to pull out the dark areas in here. So I'm going to find the darkest spots on my piece and just try to make them darker. And that makes it so that if there were a scale from like really light gray to very dark, it makes the scale larger. And the larger your scale, the more cooler your piece looks. We call that increasing the contrast. So some of the areas that I'm going to do that at would be, you know, down here in the legs, so that you could tell the difference between the fur, these edges of the arms and such. The eyes I really need to make darker because the brightest spot on it is this little light spot right there. Alright, looks like that's pretty much a finished drawing. The final step is actually to clean it up. As you can see, I got some smudges over here. That's normal. Most of the time when you draw, you try to keep a sheet of paper or maybe something there like a book or something to elevate your hand so that it's not touching the piece, so it avoids smudging. That typically happens a lot. If you want clean work that's of good craftsmanship, you know, strive for making that piece look squeaky clean. What I'm doing right now, I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to erase my little light bulb thing that I drew. If you didn't know what that was, hey, that's okay, you know, you will in my class. You know, I like to use symbols and pictures a lot to communicate ideas. And I'm just getting rid of any excess pre-drawing lines that are sticking out here. You could even use your eraser to go in and touch up edges, maybe soften some areas. You know, so like if I wanted this area to look like right here, a little less harsh because it looks nice and soft and furry in there, you know, I could just take my kneaded eraser or your other eraser, just kind of dab it a little bit, you know, kind of do that. You can even add highlights with your eraser. So anyway, that concludes this tutorial and just an example of some of the things we're going to work on as we go. So I look forward to working with you.